Hello, hello. Hope you're having a wonderful day. This is another VSCS-III devlog. I'm trying not to sound too much like a YouTuber, but that said, I do have a better mic. I didn't buy it. Well, I bought it ages ago. I dug it out of storage, so hopefully I sound a little bit better. I have a pop filter and everything. I don't know why I have this, but hopefully it's less grating on the ears. You're welcome, I guess. Okay, let's get into it. So everything I've been working on for the past little while, I think we're about a month into like really active development at the time I'm recording this, because I started at the beginning of March, or I picked this project back up at the beginning of March, and there wasn't much done. So we're about almost 30 days out from that, which is pretty good. I've been working on a lot of stuff on this, and I haven't been very focused. So I've tried to kind of throw some things together and cobble together a theme, but once we actually jump into the engine, you'll see that not a lot of the stuff I'm working on is connected. I'm kind of just putting the pieces together. That's Gamedev sometimes, is you're not just working on one thing. You start working on one thing, then you realize you have to do another thing. It's like that scene from Malcolm in the Middle, if you know what I mean, where you start working on one thing, then you realize, oh shoot, I forgot I have to build a component for this to work, and in order to do that, I need to fix this particular bug that's been annoying me, and then you go down a rabbit hole, and you just end up doing something completely unrelated. That's game development. So I want to start off with something focused, which is kind of just talking through my design process. I know I'm starting us out in this design document a lot, but I'm making a UI-based game, so it's kind of hard to avoid that. But I do think it's interesting how much of the actual implementation and like gameplay decisions are being driven by things that I'm doing in this document here in Sprite, which is not a game engine, it's a pixel art program. But it's still driving a lot of things, because this is where I ideate, this is where I iterate. And something that I like to do just for fun, but it's beneficial for videos like this, is I like to keep older versions of my designs around so that I can look back and refer to old versions, as I've kind of mocked up here. So as if I was updating my logo, this is kind of the process that I followed, which was, yeah, you just change the colors here, and then you add a drop shadow, and then you add an edge highlight there, and you get that 3D effect. And then you go, well, that looks a little flat, what else can I do with it? And you can get inspiration from a lot of different places. So for me, obviously, I'm looking at Windows 3 for ideas. And this icon here, these two are Windows 3 icons, I believe 3.1. These have been weirdly influential on a lot of things, these tiny 32 by 32 icons. This one's exactly 32 by 32. Because I really like this tricolor design. I've been referring it to tricolor as tricolor in code and documents, because that pink, yellow, blue, I don't know why, I really like it. And it kind of aligns with, I won't go into too much detail, but it aligns with like factions and themes that I'm trying to come up with for the game. So I'm trying to work that into things. So it's just funny how this little icon, and I don't think it's a motif in Windows 3, it's just this one, it's 3 bright colors, but that pink, yellow, blue, that like teal has been driving a lot of things. So we'll see that in a little bit. And I'm just playing around with different colors of my logo because I think that's fun. And different edge highlights like the calculator icon here, because this calculator icon is really goofy. And I stole some elements for it for the calculator application that I'll probably implement in the future for VSCS-III. So, okay, let's get into some actual stuff. I'm going to scroll down here. Just first example, because it's something I was working on recently, and this kind of shows how design and iterating on things can drive mechanical decisions and UI decisions. These are icons from VSCS-II. So the way it worked was, on the main menu you had save slots 1, 2, and 3, and you could click on those, obviously load up the save files, and when you beat the game, the save file would swap out with one of these 4 icons, because there are 4 different endings. And so I was trying to think, well, what can I do with this now that I have color? how can I change the design based on the themes that I'm going for, based on the new color palette, based on new design principles. And the first thing I did was I just added different colors. I just took that basic save icon and I thought, okay, let's play around with colors because, you know, we've got those tricolors there. We've got the pink, the yellow, the blue. Maybe the save icon changes color instead of showing a faction icon or something when you beat the game. So that's, you know, it's not strictly a mechanical change, but it changes the UI, it changes the visual identity of the game. And that was very basic idea there. And I thought maybe you start with a gray icon if you don't have a save loaded, and then it turns a color once you actually have a save in that save slot. And then when you beat the game, or as you're progressing through acts, it changes color. Little things like that, I think, make the experience a lot nicer because you load into the main menu and you go, ooh, something changed. Interesting. That's actually the game responding to my actions. It's just a UI change, but it's the kind of thing you need to consider as a designer. The main menu is important. It's the first thing players see. So I came up with that. This is pretty lazy, honestly, but it gets the job done. And then I played around with bringing these into the actual engine, and it turns out with the higher resolution of Windows 3 versus the old Mac 128K screen resolution, it just doesn't look as good. These look really, really small. So I messed around and came up with this much more 3D, bigger save icon. And I'm calling it a save icon. I know it's a floppy disk. So I did actually take a look at some floppy disks and figure out like where it's inset. So you can see there's a little bevel there and where it's like actually raised, so on the edges. So I think this label's usually a little bit raised. If not, it is on my floppy disks, so too bad. So I like this. This isn't the final design. I'll show you that in a moment, but just responding to the actual new fake operating system, I have to update a lot of things. But the colors are driving what that's going to look like now. So here's what I've landed on. And this kind of ties into the idea of iteration from before, which is just do stuff. If you don't know how to solve a problem, just open up a design document, open up Sprite, and just start doing things. And if it sucks, you can just throw it out. Like, I know I said I keep a lot of old versions of icons, but I didn't keep a lot of the intermediate versions of these because I landed on something pretty quickly. The shape I was very happy with, but I'm playing around with all these different colors based on the window themes as well. So you can see we've got the basic green. This is one that I made actually. This is this color of the windows that you're seeing in the engine with that alternating dark green and dark teal that I really like. That's the Mayfly main theme. But I didn't like the edge highlight colors, because if you're playing around with this and you go, okay, what's the edge highlight color on this? And is it green? Because that's pretty bright. It doesn't look terrible, but it kind of contrasts with that blue. Do you go with that bright teal? That also doesn't look the best. And then what do you use for the shadow? Because if we're looking at our colors here, what do we do? Gray? Yeah, that doesn't look very nice. That really clashes with everything. So maybe the save icon isn't the same color as the windows. Maybe it's this really bright green, you know? And this green up here looks really, really flat. So maybe we'll just do a textured green. And maybe green is the neutral color in the game. Green is when you haven't chosen a faction. And maybe the colors of the factions in the game, I'm talking like writing now, like how the color of the save icons ties into the story of the game. That's how early on we are and how tied everything is together. Maybe the save icons change to a blue, a red, and a yellow based on what faction you side with, and green is just the neutral color. That fits with what I kind of have in my head right now. But it's funny to me because this is just coming up with floppy disk icons for the main menu, but it's helping me bring together the visual identity and the thematic identity of the game, even though this is something that you would think is completely superficial and shouldn't matter. Anyways, weird tangent there. And then up here, instead of numbers, I am deciding to go with essentially Roman numerals, just a 1, 2, and a 3. This is a Mayfly thing. You don't know what that means. I'm going to show you it in a moment here. So yeah, those are my floppy disk icons. I hope you enjoyed them. And then, yeah, this is the actual like section of the design document that I put together just for my own reference. Essentially saying that, yes, the labels doesn't show the numbers, the actual numerals 1, 2, and 3. It shows 1, 2, 3. And it looks like it's a little bit inset on the label there when it's empty, which I think looks really nice, especially once you zoom out a little bit. Yeah, I'm very happy with that. And I didn't want it to be 1, then 2, like these two. I wanted it to be centered because I think that gives it a nice feel. It doesn't feel like you're not on the best save icon, if that makes sense. I want it to feel like it's visually centered all the time. So it's a weird thing, but it occurred to me. And then, yeah, I think putting all these together, if the save file changes when you complete the game, I might not actually do that, but I think that's an interesting idea, so I threw it in here. And then just calling out that this follows the same pattern as I've been following for other icons in the game, the usual 32 by 32 icons. These are obviously a bit bigger, but they tend to look really flat and dark gray when clicked because you only see it for a moment there. Okay, cool. I feel like I got my thoughts across there, so let's move on. Again, just tying into that idea of iteration, I wanted to show you the kind of big faction icon, operating system icon of the game. I don't know if I've mentioned this in the last couple videos, but the hacked version of the VSCS-III, this is in-universe now, this is not a real operating system. The hacked version of the fictional VSCS-III is going to run an operating system called Mayfly OS, the Mayfly operating system. This symbol, I won't go into it. I've been working on this for a while, actually. It's one of the first ideas that I had for the game that started to feel like it was tying everything together. There's a lot of thematic stuff worked into this that I hope will come across in the final game. Maybe I'll talk about it a bit in the future. I won't get into it too much now, but please know that everything here is very intentional. But this is meant to be a Mayfly, the bug, the creature. And this is a very blown up version of the first tiny version that I made. You will have seen this in the first video, I think in the bottom right of the mock-up windows. So I took that and then I tried to make it a lot rounder and tried to make the pieces fit together a little bit better. This is very visual design. This isn't like the symbol itself is very thematic. The iteration is not so much, I think, here. But if you're interested, this is like a lot of work just listening to podcasts and trying to even things out and give it a nice balance. This looked really huge, so I brought it down. That looked a little bit like a jewel, which I thought was quite nice. And it fits into the 3 arrows at the very bottom, which is a very crucial part of the design. And then I made the wings match up, because obviously these are wings. This is a Mayfly. This is the tail, this is the head, and these two are the wings, just in case you didn't pick up on that. I hope you did, because otherwise it's a bad design. I don't know. And little things to consider. So I adjusted these quite a bit in the final silhouette because I wanted it to all line up. So if you trace the line from the very bottom, it should line up with the wings. Not in this version, as you can see, but in the final version, it does line up. So it means the distance from like here to here is matched here to here roughly, because it lines up at a 45-degree angle if you follow it with the diagonal line. So just good design, equal spacing roughly among everything. I'm very happy with the Mayfly design, and it looks very good in engine. So you'll be seeing a lot of this if I continue making videos, which I should. All right, and yeah, so for the actual wing shape, this is another thing that I do when I'm just stuck on ideas, as opposed to just always pulling from Windows 3, because I've mentioned before, I don't want to just copy old operating systems. I want to bring in other elements. The Mayfly icon uses the wing shape from an actual Mayfly image I found, so you can see that lines up. This isn't exactly what I ended up using, but I was playing around with these like really choppy shapes based on the like original blown up icon, and these just look terrible. Like this looks too much like a key. This one looks really aggressive and doesn't get the kind of serene nature that I wanted to get across. Sounds a little pretentious, but you know what I mean. It needed to be a lot softer. And the only way I actually got a design that I was happy with was I literally just searched picture of Mayfly from side view, and I got this, and I cut it out, and I pulled it into Sprite and scaled it down to approximately the right size, and ta-da! I obviously had to change it quite a bit to make it line up with everything, but hey, if it works, right? You can get inspiration from all kinds of places. There's no such thing as cheating here, as long as you are making it your own, right? So yeah, that's the Mayfly icon. I've shown you the silhouette, and this is actually not the final version because I added quite a bit more. These are, at time of recording, the final or current iterations of the Mayfly symbol, which is going to be very crucial to the game, as I mentioned. So the silhouette, I think, is very, very strong. The spacing's very strong. I've given it some dithering and highlights and lowlights, so it's always got that top left lighting, which I've mentioned before, which fits with everything else in the game. I think it is predominantly going to be green, which will match the default windows, and as I mentioned, and you've probably picked up on, green is a fairly neutral tone in terms of the game's themes. So I think green is a really good go-to for this. But I've also been playing around with the tricolor, as mentioned before, because it's VSCS-III. I've already mentioned there are probably, if I stick with my current ideas, there are probably going to be 3 main factions or groups of people that you can interact with in the story of the game. And I think incorporating them into the symbol in this way is going to be a good way to tie things together. So I'm very happy with this. Very happy with this. Okay, that's kind of the most cohesive part of what I've been working on. We're going to jump into the game engine in a second here, and you are going to see the absolute scattershot, throw things at the wall, see what sticks approach I've been taking. I've just been doing things. Let me cut over to that and I'll show you. So we are here in Unity. This is the actual game now. You will see that things look a lot different from last time. I hope mostly better. So first of all, you can see our icons here. I've actually made these prefabs, so icons are actually configurable. The idea with making these prefabs or reusable components as opposed to just buttons on the desktop is I eventually want you to be able to go through a file browser, and I want to implement my own file system. And I'm going to take inspiration from my last game, but I want to make it more dynamic. So I guess you don't know this, but the code for the file browser was so gross in VSCS-II, so I want to make it more dynamic. So making reusable icons that are consistent throughout the entire game is a very big part of that, and I finished that up just this morning, I believe. So I'm happy with that. I was working on it yesterday as well. So we can open up our settings window, which has a placeholder icon, which is not final. You can see I still have that bug where the windows don't center properly when they spawn in. There's so much to do. I'm trying not to just complain about how busy I am working on my own project. But yeah, our settings window is a little nicer of a size now. You'll notice I've made some improvements to the drop-down. A big one that I do very much want to talk about is the fact that now when you click outside of it, it closes, which is trickier than you might think. It's not too bad here, but you need to account for, obviously, this section of the select and also this section of the select. So clicks in here, I'm clicking right now, should not close the menu, obviously. It should close when something's selected, which it does now, which is very nice. I don't think that was working last time. But yeah, I've got a kind of general handler for that, making sure when you click outside of a rect transform that a component can handle that. And I believe that should, if it doesn't, I'll be embarrassed, that should count for other windows as well. Yeah, it'll minimize when you just click anything that isn't this little rectangle here. Again, little things that you always have to consider that you may not think of. That's a very strong running theme in these videos. Speaking of which, I have a funny one of these. Please ignore the taskbar that sort of works, by the way. Look, settings pop up. It should not change the order. It's just pulling in the list of windows, by the way. Anyways, I need to acknowledge that. It doesn't do anything still. But I did implement a pop-up menu, or a little expandable menu for the VSCS button here. So that will open and close. And if you open it and click outside of it, it will close. So that's the same utility method there. But a fun thing that I ran into with this, which I don't know if this will be funny to anybody but me or other front-end programmers, I suppose, but I implemented this. So I implemented it going, okay, this button toggles the menu, obviously. It opens it, closes it, easy. And then I implemented, well, if you click outside of this menu, it should close, right? This square right here that I'm tracing with my mouse. There we go, easy, done, right? Easy as that. And then I opened the menu and I tried to close the menu and I clicked on this button. I think I have some footage recorded of this, actually. Maybe I'll put it up here. But I clicked on the VSCS button and then it went, okay, that's a click outside of the menu, so I'm going to close the menu. But you also just clicked on the button, so I'm going to toggle the menu. So clicking on this button would close and then immediately reopen the menu. And I was so mad because I just thought, what? There are so many edge cases in everything where you go, how am I supposed to account for everything when I'm making a game that's this complex? It's just exhausting sometimes. So yeah, I fixed it. I just had to add a check so it will not auto-close the menu when you click in this square as well on this actual button, but it will still toggle the menu, but it just doesn't do it twice. So just goofy, right? So much stuff. Just while we're looking at the taskbar, I still haven't implemented pagination or window minimization. That's going to be a big feature that I need to fix. I already mentioned that when you have a couple of things open, it's just dynamically grabbing a list of the windows. So these don't actually do anything. It's just populating buttons at the moment that have no actions attached to them. But you know what time it is right now that I'm recording this because this clock live updates, which is very cool. I don't know if I'll keep that. I think I will. This is another thing that's interesting is I added that and then I was really worried as soon as I implemented it because I started thinking, okay, in the story of my game, if you are playing the game at 3 o'clock in the morning, because by the way, I was programming this clock at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, right? It was the last thing I did. Then I went to sleep. It was a Friday night. I know, I'm crazy. But 4 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, what if somebody's playing the game at 4 o'clock in the morning? Why would characters be online? Why would you be able to chat with characters about current events? And if I reference something being in the afternoon and you look at your clock in the bottom right and it says, it's 3 a.m. because you're a lunatic, you're playing video games at 3 in the morning, right? Who would ever? Is that going to be immersion breaking? I don't know. Does it make sense to do something goofier with the clock? Do I want to make it run fast so it's always wrong and make that a joke? Because I think that kind of fits the theme. You know, maybe Mayfly OS couldn't fix a bug with the VSCS-III where the clock is always wrong and always runs fast, so it doesn't actually pull in your system time, and that's my excuse. I don't know. There's a lot of little things to consider. I'm having an existential crisis and like a design crisis over just this clock in the bottom right of the taskbar. So much to consider, but it helps to be detail-oriented. Last thing to show off, which isn't very much, is the VSCS terminal. I've got a really nice icon that I'm happy with, which is, maybe I'll put a picture up as well. It is based on the MS-DOS icon. So my thought is I'll make a little VSCS icon. It's kind of nice because MS, Microsoft, lines up with VS in VSCS quite a bit. So I'm playing off that. I'm joking around with it a bit by making the icon an homage to that. But that opens up the terminal, which is pretty bare bones. Also, please ignore the tearing. I'm still trying to fix that. I know that looks kind of goofy when I'm moving things around. I'm aware. But I've got this little thing. It doesn't do anything. If I press enter, it just highlights the text and it looks super gross. But yeah, I'm going to implement a terminal. I don't know to what extent I'm going to actually implement it into gameplay. Fun fact, there is a terminal in VSCS-II. I think it might actually be in the final builds of the game. I don't think I ever removed it, but you can access it from the desktop of the game by pressing, what is it? It's a little Easter egg for anybody who listened this far. If you go into VSCS-II, and I think you hold down Control, then hold down D, and then press B, I think Debug, or D and T for Debug Terminal. I could be wrong. Apologies if that's incorrect and you go try to do it and it doesn't work, but it'll spawn an icon on the desktop that is the developer debug terminal. So I implemented a terminal like this just for myself, and it looked too professional for a debug tool, but it would allow me to actually modify in-game events and force things to happen so that I didn't have to play through the game every single time. So my own little debug terminal. So I don't know if that's what this is going to end up as. I might actually remove it from the final game, but because Windows 3 had that underlying MS-DOS, I don't know exactly how it was structured, but it ran on top of MS-DOS. I'm curious if I can implement certain mechanics in the game through the terminal, or if it'll just be kind of an Easter egg thing. Like, there will be a file browser, a visual file browser, where you can, click on folders and read notes. This is a note icon right here. And it'll just be done through double clicks. But I think it would be fun to also do that through the terminal. But I don't want to get too carried away with that because I feel like it'll alienate folks who aren't as programmer savvy or tech savvy. They'll open up the terminal and go, am I supposed to use this? Am I supposed to understand this? So I think, and also it poses some weird design challenges. Like, obviously this game is going to have a chat system where you can talk to other characters. And I don't want to implement that in the terminal because that just sounds like a nightmare. Maybe I could do it, but does it really make sense to implement that? Because this is all simulated. This isn't an actual computer system. So anything I do, I have to very strictly design. And then there's other ideas, like maybe you only have to open it up for a couple of side quests, and it's like this opens up a whole new world, and this allows you to unlock certain files, and that gives me some narrative ideas as well. And it's probably clear from the way I'm talking, I don't actually know what this game's going to look like in a lot of places. I have the broad strokes written out. I have the fundamental design done, but tying into what I was talking about earlier with design iteration, it's the same in the engine. I'm just doing things and going, I'm pretty sure this is going to be a part of the final game, but if I need to cut it or I need to change it, that's okay. So, I guess just to tie all of this together, I have this philosophy. I'm going to get preachy. I'll do this in every video to some extent. I have this philosophy that I approach game development with, called, quote, game dev as improv, end quote. And I started saying it as a joke because when I was making VSCS-II and a couple of other games, I would just start doing something and start building something, like a very technical feature that would take days or weeks without a solid idea of where it was going, but just kind of trusting that I would find the art and find the intention and purpose along the way, which when you're building something like software sounds pretty scary because it requires a lot of planning to implement anything in a game. And if I was working with a team, it would be a nightmare. But as a solo developer, I have the luxury of just being able to do whatever I want and scrap whatever I want, and working with very personal intention. And that is a luxury. And it still requires a lot of discipline. But I think you just have to be open to taking ideas as they come and being open to changing things and treat game development as improv. It is a nonsensical statement, but that is genuinely my philosophy going into a lot of things. Is I will get stuck with design paralysis because I'm a very detail-oriented person, right? So continuously insisting that I'm just making this up as I go along, that gives me a lot of confidence in what I'm doing. And part of that is backed by the fact that I know I can complete projects like this. But part of it is just a blind faith in my own skills and blind faith that I will find the solution to all of these design problems just through iterating, just through trying things. It's pretty scary, but it's a fun way of doing things. You got to trust the process, right? Even when your windows are tearing because your sprites aren't scaling properly and the window's not the correct pixel width or something. I don't know how to fix that. I think that's the end of my rant. I'm going to cut this one short. I think I'm at like half an hour or 40 minutes, but whatever. These are fun to make. I'm enjoying this. I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble, and stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your day. I will talk to you soon. All right, have a good one.